I'm going to repeat what I've been saying, and I probably will repeat it. Eternal security rests with God. God planned our salvation, provided our salvation, applies salvation, is working it out, and will bring it to its completion. And by God, I mean the Father, the Son, and the Spirit. All three of them play a role. Each of them does something with our salvation. But not everybody believes this. There are some that hold to what we would call a conditional security, that we have to actually persevere. We have to do something hard to make it to the end in some way, and that some people could lose their salvation. And so we're looking at some passages of Scripture that they use, that they cite. We're going to look at two of them today. They both are talking about the same time, but we're going to look at these today and see in their context if it is referring to you and I, and if it is even about spiritual salvation. I'm Pastor Tim Holscher, and we put in today in Matthew chapter 10. Jesus is talking to the 12 disciples, yes, even including Judas, even though Judas is not a believer, but he's sending them out. And we know he's not a believer because it tells us that at the end of John chapter 6, that Jesus knew from the beginning who he was and that he was not a believer and he was a betrayer. And that's not the only time we know this. But he's talking to these 12 disciples as he sends them out. And he's anticipating not something that's going to happen to them, because it doesn't happen to the disciples at this time, but it is going to come at a future time. There's a future time. In fact, it's a time yet future to us, because this doesn't involve this. This really involves him sending out his people, Israel, not his people, the church, out into the world with a message. Matthew chapter 10 and verse 21. Brother will betray brother to death, and a father his child, and children will rise up against parents and cause them to be put to death. That, how callous, thinking about the severity with which this takes place. You will be hated by all because of my name, but it is the one who endured to the end who will be saved. But whenever they persecute you in one city, flee to the next, for truly I say to you, will not finish going through all the cities of Israel until the Son of Man comes. He's looking at the future coming of the Son of Man. This is not when Christ comes for his church. That's a different event. It has different language used with it, but it also talks about something different that he's doing. This is talking about the mission that these particular people are given as they're anticipating the coming of the Son of Man. And there's a window of time. They know that coming is coming. They don't know precisely when, but they know that it is coming and it is near. And there are statements that Jesus makes to indicate to them the nearness of that time, but not the specific time, not the day or the hour. But they're going to know that it's coming here within a specific time. That you and I don't know this. We have nothing given in Scripture that tells us how we can calculate or figure out when the Son of Man might come. But this is what he's referring to. And when he's talking about the one who endures, or as a verb, takes patiently these things, with all the betrayal and all the way these people are doing it, he says, he will be saved. We're going to have to come back to this and look a little bit more, or make reference to this here in just a little while. If we go over to Matthew chapter 24, Jesus is speaking later now. This is probably being spoken at least 2 years after the statement we just read in Matthew 10, but it's being spoken about the same event. And he's speaking again with the disciples on the Mount of Olives, and he says, and then they will hand you over to be persecuted, and they will kill you. And he's not referring specifically to those people right there, though they didn't know that at that time. He's again referring to them as representatives of the people of Israel and the responsibility God will give them at a future time. They will kill you, and you will be hated by all nations because of my name. And many will fall away, betray one another, and hate one another. Many false prophets will rise and deceive many. Because lawlessness will multiply, the love of many will grow cold. You wonder how families can turn on each other in that context? It's because the love of them grows cold. And it grows cold because of false prophecies, because lawlessness increases. This is why this happens. But in that context, where there's all this exceptional hostility that is pointed against them, he says, but the one who endures to the end will be saved. And this good news of the kingdom, now this parallels what he was talking about, this gospel going out this gospel going out in Israel, waiting for the Son of Man to come, he says, this good news of the kingdom will be proclaimed in all the world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. Now, he's referring in this context to what we popularly call the tribulation period. There's tribulation in our present time. Same word, same language. We might also refer to it as Daniel's 70th week, a specific time that was given to Daniel in a prophecy, and there is a 70th week that has not yet happened. If we go down in this passage, I think it's very important that we consider this statement. This out of the mouth of Jesus. This isn't the only time that we have this in Scripture. This is repeated in the Old Testament too. But Jesus says, "For then there will be great tribulation, such has not occurred since the beginning of the world until now, nor ever will again." In other words, nor will it ever come to be. In other words, that time is going to be unprecedented. It does not refer to the 70 AD when Jerusalem was sacked. That time was not unprecedented. There had been times that had been worse, and there certainly have been Holocaust and events that have been much worse since. This is going to be really unprecedented. But I want to go back and I want to think about something that we had up above here when he was talking about go back to our verse, but the one who endures. This word patient or endures means to maintain proper character under something. What is lacking in these other people up here? It says they fall away. They literally are scandalized. They betray one another. What does he say? They hate one another. They have false prophets rise and they mislead one another. And the people's love grows cold. In other words, none of these people, in the midst of this horrible time that's coming, or these events, none of them actually maintains proper character under this. There's only one group of people that will do that, and that's believers. Believers are the ones that are going to do this. That's what he's encouraging them with. You're going to go through this really horrid time. And he's not saying here, well, some people were believers, but they didn't endure, so they're gone. No, that's not what he's getting at. He's drawn a distinction between the believers, the people who genuinely actually can have the proper character going into the end, versus all these other people that give up and they hate each other and they betray each other and they don't have love for each other. In fact, it's very interesting when you get over to Matthew 25 and he has the sheep and the goats. We always say salvation is by grace through faith, but you know what? That time is going to be so horrible that God can judge those people based on what they've done as a proof that only real believers, the sheep, will actually provide and care and visit those that are in need. The goats don't. They're going, when did we see that? When did we see that? They're excusing themselves. We never saw any of this. We didn't see you. But the believers do, because they actually take their situation patiently. Now, there's something else that happens in the midst of all of this. If we go back to Isaiah chapter 11, we have this statement about Jesus in the future that it says he will strike the earth with the rod of his mouth and with the breath of his lips. We have a similar statement stated over in the book of Revelation. And so when he's talking about strike the earth with the rod of his mouth and with the breath of his lips, he's talking about him speaking a word, and he lays judgment. He lays a devastation to these people. In this statement that we were just looking at over here in Matthew chapter 24 about this individual who endures to the end or is patient to the end, they are saved. This is not how they get saved spiritually. They're saved from the judgment that comes. If we went over to Revelation chapter 14, it says in verse 9, then another angel, a third one, followed them, saying with a loud voice, if anyone worships the beast in his image, receives a mark on his forehead or his hand, he will also drink of the wine of the wrath of God, or the anger of God, which is mixed in full strength in the cup of his anger. Now, what he means by this, and this is maybe something helpful, people, if you're one of these people that has a tendency maybe to drink wine today, you probably just pour a glass of wine and you drink it. We would not think in modern culture today of drinking wine the way they did, but they always diluted their wine. They used the expression, they had certain expressions for people that drank full strength wine. So they mixed it half and half, 40-60, whatever it is, wine with water. The point being that is used here, which is something that would have been considered rather extreme, was that God's going to give them this glass of the wine of his anger, and it is undiluted. In other words, they're going to drink from the undiluted anger of God. And it says, and he will be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment descends forever and ever, and they have no rest day or night, those who worship the beast in his image and who receive the mark of his name. Here is the perseverance or the patience, that same word that we had over there in Matthew 24 and had over in Matthew 10, of the saints who keep the commandments of God in their faith in Jesus. In other words, they know that there's judgment coming for these people. It is going to be undiluted. It's going to be very severe. And it's one of the things that helps them to continue to be patient in the midst of all these horrible things. I'm sure that some of them might be even tempted to take the mark, because without the mark, you can't buy food. You can't trade. You can't do anything. And so you're thinking, man, I'm really hungry. I haven't eaten in over a week. If I just take the mark, I can buy. But these are believers, and they're going to go, no, because he is not my God. He is not my Lord, and I am not going to take his mark. I'm not going to acknowledge who this being is just so that I can put food in my belly. And they are going to remember the severe, undiluted anger of God that these people are going to drink from. And it will help these believers to be patient. So this statement back here in Matthew 10 as well as Matthew 24 is talking about physical deliverance. Because when the Lord returns at the end and he speaks that word and he slays the wicked and he brings devastation on the planet, the believers who have made it to the end are not going to get caught in that crossfire, and they're not going to be destroyed by his anger at the end. They're going to be saved. And I don't believe saved here in either of these passages referring to what we would call spiritual salvation, regeneration, and all the kinds of things that we associate with it. I believe he's talking about physical deliverance. And it's one of the problems we have, because we've been trained when we read the word save or saved, it's always talking about eternal salvation. But it's not always. There are a number of passages in which the word save is used. We could go over to the book of Acts, where there's a shipwreck, and it talks about 120 some people who were saved from drowning. Not spiritually saved, but saved from drowning in a shipwreck. That's just one of many examples where the word save is used in this way. And I believe that that's what this is for. It's a word that meant to encourage these people. Hey, if you make it to the end, because you haven't died in these other things, and it's not like, well, they failed if they died before you. No, he's not saying that. But if they do survive to the end, they're going to be those who are going to be living to see the Lord come back. And they will be physically delivered. That's what this is referring to. By the way, again, just to remind you, this is talking about a different group of people at a different period of time than a reference to you and I. And therefore, this really isn't even about us, but it's neither is it about the fact that if a person does not endure to the end, that person is going to lose their salvation. That's not what this is about. It's talking about promise of physical deliverance when the Lord returns in judgment at the end of Daniel's 70th week. Therefore, again, it's a verse that people read and they go, oh, well, what if I don't endure? Because we always have, everybody has bad days. We always have days that, well, we don't endure. We're not patient under the difficulties and challenges of life. But that's not what this is about. This is about a different event in a different kind of endurance under a specific set of circumstances. So I hope that this is helpful in, again, reminding us that our salvation is in God's hands, always has been, always will be. Thank him for that. And I want to thank you for joining me today.